We know the obvious. Breathing stops, heartbeat stops, brain goes dead, body starts decomposing. Obvious, no bananas for that one. That's old stuff. But what about your own experience? What about your own experience? Do we know, and this is a question I put to you, we can certainly pursue. I would invite you perhaps to pursue this in your midterm paper. Do we know that death entails an utter cessation of any type of individual experience, continuity of experience, of you, of me? Do we know that? Or do we simply presume it? If we presume it or we believe it, upon the basis of what do we believe it? So what I'd like to go into now is simply trying, I'll tell you my motivation exactly, so there'll be no mystery around that. I'd like to have this course be as little mysterious as possible. I'll tell you my motivation. What I'd like to do now is make as intelligible as possible to you, in a short time, the Tibetan Buddhist view on the nature of dying, the nature of consciousness, origins of consciousness, and why they believe what they do believe, and why some claim to know what they claim to know. Okay? And so, I'll give you the short version first and then unpack it. The Tibetan Buddhists believe, and I would say this runs throughout the entire civilization, and it traces back to classical India, which then traces back for many, many centuries, going back at least as far as the Buddha, here's the short version, that there is something called, that we could, in terms of modern parlance, I'm given a modern name, we could call the conservation of consciousness. Conservation of consciousness. Nice, easy phrase to remember. They don't quite use that terminology, but that's exactly the gist of what they're getting at. And what they're saying is this, the conservation of consciousness. I will use this because I'm trained in physics, and I really studied in quite some detail conservation of mass energy. This whole principle of conservation of energy was something that was a philosophical notion in the mid-19th century, became a scientific fact, and then with Einstein relativity theory, special relativity theory, became not merely the conservation of energy, but the conservation of mass energy. So let's use that as an analogy. I'm not going to go springboarding off into philosophy of physics right now, but simply as an analogy, a pretty much universally accepted truth in physics is that for any configuration of mass energy, including your own body, this classroom, galaxies, pi mesons, quarks, what have you, that any configuration of mass energy, anything physical, anything is composed of mass energy, derives from mass energy. That is, it's never created out of nothing. You don't get, in other words, you don't get something for nothing. If you have an apple here, the apple wasn't always an apple, but before it was an apple, the stuff of the apple was something else. It might have been nitrates, it might have been carbon dioxide, it could have been all kinds of things. In fact, it was a lot of things. So a lot of stuff became the apple. Now let's imagine you eat the apple, and then the apple ceases being an apple, especially when it gets into your lower intestinal tract. Nobody would identify that as an apple anymore, but the stuff of the apple is transformed into something else. And then you poop it out and it becomes something else, and something else turns into grass, and so on and so on. But what you have in the print, and I'll stop the metaphor really quickly, or the analogy, with the principle of conservation of mass energy, for any configuration of mass energy, like an apple, it always comes from something else. You never get something for nothing. Something transforms into something else. The manifestation, the appearance, the form may be very different. But nevertheless, it's the stuff. The stuff gives rise to stuff. Now, in the conservation of mass energy, just as you never get something for nothing, similarly, on the other end of the other end of the process, you never do you have something transforming into nothing. Something transforms into something else. It may transform into something very similar. So your name is Dave, is it? Jeff. Jeff. So there, I'm looking at Jeff's body. Well, I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm looking and I'm looking. And Jeff's body just seems to be kind of sitting there. Well, in the Buddhist understanding, Jeff's body is going through momentary transformations. I mean, there's nothing static, nothing stable there. But in fact, right down to the cellular level, right down to the molecular level, every element of Jeff's body is in a constant mode of change, of transformation. But it's transformation with coherence. So I look at his body now, it's very, very similar. So the transformation is taking place, but it's transforming into something very much like itself. In fact, Jeff right now is aging. He's getting older and older. Wrinkles are gradually forming on his forehead. His hair is starting to dry up. It's going to get like mine after a while. His back is slowly tilting. His bones are slowly shrinking. He's just withering on the vine. You can't see it. It's going so slowly here. You get to my age, and then it's pretty, just kind of watch me age, But the point is the transformation is constant. It's always ongoing, transforming. The earlier stuff of Jeff's body is transforming into later stuff, but it's very similar on the one hand. On the other hand, if we have Joe over here, he leaves his classroom. I'm not going to pick on Jeff anymore. And Joe helps on his motorcycle, has a head-on collision, and one day later his body's putrefying, then his body is now going through rapid changes, and it's going to look less and less like a body as the days go by, let alone if it's incinerated. All right. So again, the metaphor is simply you don't get something for nothing, and something never transforms into nothing. There's always transformation into, sometimes with a radical shift of form. Okay? And sometimes, as in Jeff's body right now, very similar form. Well, the Buddhists say a similar thing. I'm just giving you the conclusion, and then we'll try to see how they get there. That there's a similar kind of thing of conservation of consciousness. That consciousness, again, now consciousness is not something mysterious. Let's not mystify it. Consciousness is just that sheer event of being aware. Okay? I'm aware of your gray t-shirt. I'm aware right now whether my mind is calm or agitated. I'm aware of, that is auditory awareness, of the sound of my own voice, hands clapping and so on. So it's that event of being aware. And awareness almost always, perhaps always, but at least almost always, is aware of something. Okay, so I have a sense that my awareness is over here, but I'm sensing you way over there. And in fact, you are over there. You're good 14, 15 feet away, and I'm sensing you, I'm conscious of you. How is it that the molecules of my body can be way over here? And of course, they're being impacted by all kinds of things, heat from the environment, photons from the light, sound waves, and so forth. But that happens to rocks, okay? I mean, rocks also have photons strike them, and heat waves strike them, and all kinds of stuff hits rocks. But as far as we know, rocks don't sit here and then look over there and say, oh, who are you, right? So they're getting the same kind of incoming stimuli, but something's not happening. Namely, as far as we know, they're not conscious. But I am conscious. You are conscious. Look around, nobody's fallen asleep yet. You're conscious, all right? So then we can ask, okay, consciousness. Well, let's look at the phenomenon of consciousness. Now we are conscious of the 5 sense fields, visual, auditory, and so forth. Sights, sounds, and so forth. And we are also aware of our own minds. Something is a bit more private. Again, Molly was in the front row last time. Remember the whole thing with Molly about what's going on in her mind. Remember it was chopsticks or grasshoppers. But what's going on? Well, she can be conscious of her own mental states, the contents of her minds. If she does not often in a class, starts dreaming, she and she alone, presumably, will know the contents of her dreams. Consciousness. All right. Now, consciousness is a phenomenon. It's an event, like so many physical events. And the Buddhists would say that consciousness does not emerge from, it does not actually emerge from matter. Not from the brain, not from bone marrow, not from your body, not from planet Earth. Consciousness, they say, is a different type of phenomenon than chunky stuff, like atoms, molecules, and so forth. All right, so it looks like we have a dualism, for starters. That not all things are physical, all right? Not all things are composed of atoms or configurations of mass energy, physical mass energy. And I'm giving you just the conclusion here. And moreover, I'm not asking you to accept anything. I'm asking you to learn, or inviting you to learn what these people have concluded, and then again, we'll try to not get off into too many tangents. They say the event of consciousness is not something that's composed of mass energy. At the same time, so it's a different type of phenomenon. All right? Well, you can think about other type of phenomena. Again, we don't have to be mysterious or mystical here. For example, a love for a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or you're valuing a certain type of grade. I mean, it can be pretty prosaic. Or beauty itself. Beauty. Anybody doubt that beauty exists? In some meaningful way, beauty exists? Is beauty composed of atoms? Is beauty itself, not the painting, but the beauty of the painting? Is beauty composed? Justice. Anybody deny that justice exists? Sometimes justice is served, sometimes it's not served. Is justice composed of atoms and molecules? So the Buddhists would say, well, there are a heck of a lot of things that are not composed of molecules or atoms, and they have a lot of clout. I mean, they have a really significant status in the big picture of reality. And one of those kind of non-physical entities or phenomena or processes, events, is consciousness. Sensory consciousness, mental consciousness. And moreover, they say, consciousness is preserved, is a natural phenomenon. It's a natural phenomenon, and consciousness may go through a lot of transformations. It may take on many guises. So for example, you can be looking at white, and then suddenly your visual consciousness of white transforms into visual consciousness of red. Or you're feeling very calm, your mental awareness is very serene, and then suddenly it's very, very turbulent with anger. Okay? So a lot of transformations, and in fact they say that consciousness can go into a dormant or potential state. If you think back to kind of high school physics, you remember you have kinetic energy and then you have potential energy? You remember? You raise a pencil up, it's got more potential energy, drop it, the potential energy is preserved, it's transformed into kinetic energy, and so forth. You remember all those conservation laws we had to study? Well, but if you just kind of look at it, you hold something up, you can't see that it has more energy, but mathematically speaking, it does have energy, because now it's been raised up here, and that energy can transform into kinetic energy, namely it drops. And so they say consciousness too isn't a phenomenon that can be manifest, but it can also go dormant. So for example, right now, as far as I can see, everybody has his and hers eyes open, so you have visual consciousness. Now, if you close your eyes, you see anything? You see anything? You can try that. You've tried. Jeff, close your eyes. You see something? What do you see?
Oh, I can imagine,
No, I didn't. Oh, but I didn't say. When I say see, I mean really. I'm sticking to the bone. I'm saying see with your eyeballs. See with your visual perception. Right now, you can see my face. You can see black. Seeing black is more than seeing nothing, isn't it? Isn't it? Otherwise, all these people are wearing black clothes. You just kind of fade out. Whatever became of you? You have no torso. So seeing black is like seeing white or red or purple. If you close your eyes, you can still see something. On the one hand, can you hear silence? This isn't quite silence, but it's close. Can you hear silence? Interesting point, isn't it? All right, but how about in deep sleep? In deep sleep, you're completely zoned out. You're out for the count. Somebody says, I'll just say Jeff. His auditory consciousness is not operating. He's not hearing silence. He's not hearing, period, right? You shine a flashlight on his eyes. This guy's out for the count. I mean, he's one of those people like sleeps like a rock. Shine a flashlight on his eyeball. He's not seeing it. He's not seeing black. He's not seeing anything at all. He's not feeling his body. You pinch him lightly. No response. Prick him with a pin. No response. Lightly. No. In other words, his tactile sense is shut down. It's gone dormant. His visual sense shut down. Maybe all of his five senses in a really deep sleep. Certainly in a coma. But even deep sleep, which we all experience, or even let alone deep sleep, just dreaming. Dreaming, I mentioned it in an earlier class, an exceptionally vivid lucid dream that I had not long ago, in which it was just so, all I can say is just so cool to experience my body in the dream, knowing fully well that it was a dream body, knowing fully well that I had a body in the bed, and knowing fully well I had no sensation of it all. It was almost like faith, and yet I knew it. But how did I know it? Isn't that interesting? You know full well, how did I know it? Because I knew I was dreaming, and as far as I know...